Hello there and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of my academic journey. In part 1, we discussed all of my academics and coursework starting back at kindergarten through high school. And in part 2, we dove into undergrad and grad school a bit. And now in this video, I will be discussing everything that I've done outside of traditional coursework. So that means all of the internships, the work study positions, as well as the research assistant positions that I've held during undergrad and grad school. So once again, I have all my notes on the phone, and so let's dive in. So as you may recall, in part 2, I discussed a little bit about my undergraduate research assistant position with the Central and Health Disparities at Virginia Commonwealth University. And so that was my first taste of public health, and how I started that position was really through a lot of volunteer work with the organization. And so a lot of that volunteer work started in the community. So it was a lot of community health fairs where we did blood pressure screenings, where we just gave out free books and really told folks about the research studies and how they could get more involved in the center. And so I love those things. They were typically on Saturdays or in the evenings, and so it was easy for me to participate and to just drive out to an event and really learn more about not just what the center had to offer to the community, but also a lot about the community and the history there. So I really enjoyed that work. And so from there, I kind of transitioned my senior year in college to work more so on their research project. Now, I mentioned before that they had a NIH grant entitled the Preterm Birth Prevention Project. And so it was a huge grant for the center, and there was some research involved. They were collecting assessments and various measures from community members around preterm birth prevention and various social determinants of health. And so a part of a program, I really got to learn a little bit more about data collection and data cleaning. That's when I actually was, I believe, my first experience or two actually in SPSS, which is a statistical software system that I was able to dive in and look at the data. It was really exciting at the time. And so also through their research, I was able to apply and enroll in the Initiative for Maximizing Student Development, or IMSD program. Now, my school had this program, and after a little bit of research, I realized that this was actually an NIH funded program, so many universities have it. And so it really was a program for minority students to get a taste of biomedical as well as social science research while in undergrad before going to graduate school. So because I already had the relationship with the center, I was able to kind of easily partner with them and conduct some independent research along with that research grant that they already had. And so that also enabled me to present at my very first conference, which was the Annual Biomedical Research Conference for Minoritized Students, also known as ABRCRAMS. And there we presented amongst a lot of other students, and they had competitions and various awards given out. And so that was kind of like my first taste of research and developing my own poster and all of those things. Also within my senior year, as I was working toward my psychology requirements to graduate, I learned of a lot of psychology labs within the school. And one of them was a lab centered around racism and those effects of health. And so I worked as an undergraduate research assistant, collecting data among students, really examining the link between their ancestral history, so based on genetic testing that students receive from a lab and how they identify or classify images. I really did not understand the research back then. I was just simply trying to learn more about what it meant to be in a lab and be amongst other students. There were also PhD level students that were also within the lab. We also attended weekly journal meetings, and so we would discuss journal articles once a week, and those meetings included the PI and the PhD students as well as the undergraduate students as well. And so that experience also made me consider applying to PhD programs immediately post undergrad, but I really wasn't too interested even in the process of applying to a PhD program. I had a little bit of fears about just getting burnt out, And so it was really an easy decision for me to decide to pursue an MPH next as opposed to a PhD, which would have probably been in something health psych related, but I just didn't know too much about my interest really in health psychology, but I did know and was really, I would say, consistent and confirmed in my interest in public health. Another research study that I also worked on my junior and senior year was through the nursing department. And so this was another Black woman professor who I learned about her research through the Aspire program that I was in. And so I believe she guest lectured and mentioned her need for some students to help her collect data and just another opportunity for undergraduate research assistants. And so that was an intervention based study that looked at nutrition and physical activity among Black women. And they actually wore Fitbits or some type of fitness tracker where they were able to log their activity and their progressions of behavior over time. And so that was kind of my first, I don't want to call it a clinical study, but it was more clinical based than what I was used to as far as community intervention kind of thing. But it was community intervention, but it was more clinical. We were looking at metabolic rates among the women. And so once again, not really my exact field. It was kind of, once again, me putting together the medical pieces and the social science pieces to really form my own public health experience. But it wasn't true public health that I was really looking for, but it gave me a great taste of nursing and just the clinical aspect behind some public health interventions that I even work on today. Now moving on to my master's program. So as I mentioned, I went to Emory, the Rollins School of Public Health in Atlanta. And so I was awarded a work study position with my financial aid package. So meaning for their program, essentially the school paid half and then the organization paid half as they were receiving a student to help them with their work. And so my first position was at a community clinic where I worked as a front desk receptionist. And so I mainly just checked in patients. We saw a lot of patients that were looking for STI and HIV testing. A lot of child immunizations came in. And this clinic did not require insurance or any payment from patients. So it was a completely free clinic. And let me just say, I really enjoyed this experience. They worked also in conjunction with a mental health housing program. And so I also got to learn a little bit about that work as well. And I went to work also at the mental health program full time during the summer of my first year as well. And so that work was directly managed under a caseworker or a social worker. And so that was when I really saw the intersections between social work and public health. Of course, public health is more on the community level or even state or national level, where social work is more of an individual personal level. But I got to experience some of that and it really was eye-opening. And so that work I did really all of my first year and then also into the summer as well. My next position during grad school was actually at the Women, Infants, and Children Office, or WIC for short. And so I actually worked at the call center. So I was the first point of contact for moms when trying to schedule appointments, pick up their WIC checks, etc. And I also spent a little bit of time working at the front desk at a local WIC office. And so they were very intentional with our training because they really wanted us to understand the complete process as one applies for WIC, sees the nutritionist, has their appointments, and then eventually gets their check or gets the WIC checks. And so I also really enjoyed this experience. It was really eye-opening as I had never really worked on the county and state side of public health. As you may recall, all of my experiences prior were more academic based. And so they were community interventions or research projects that were funded or kind of fueled through an academic institution. But this was fueled from the state government. And so I enjoyed that as well. I got to meet some really great people that had been working this job for years and had also really grown relationships with a lot of the clients. And so I loved it. And so aside from that work, the work study positions that I mentioned at the clinic and at the WIC office, I also wanted to continue my research. And so I had a taste of it back in undergrad, so I wanted to continue it within grad school as well. So actually my first year of grad school, I reached out to a professor who actually, I believe it was her first or second year at the university, because I was interested in her work. I had went online, looked at the directory of all of the professors, and really noted a few whose research stood out to me, and I contacted them for a meeting or just a really introductory call. And so it wasn't in person at the time, as my school was mainly in person at the time, pre-COVID. And so she told me about the center that she worked with and their needs for a possible graduate research assistant as well. And so I started working on a study known as the In Faith study. And so that really examined attitudes and perspectives on abortion among pastors and congregants within Macon, Georgia. And so you can really imagine interesting conversations that I've had with a lot of clergy on the topic of abortion and just sexual and reproductive health in general. And I love that experience as well. I drove almost weekly from Atlanta to Macon doing interviews among pastors and their congregants and just learning more about the community and overall their perspectives on abortion. And so I love that, and I love the team. And that was actually my first taste at collecting data in the qualitative form, and then also being able to help analyze some of that data later on down the road as well. And now I'll talk post-grad about a couple of my experiences. So I graduated in 2020, so I graduated during COVID, and so it was really instrumental for me to find some in-between work as I was graduating, but a lot of things were closed, with a lot of virtual and hybrid things going on. And so even before graduating, I had made contact with a women's or a Black woman led organization in Atlanta, and so they expressed their need for some help as well, or for a position that they had opening. But it wasn't until about 2020 that they actually offered me the position as a program associate. And so I worked with their community advisory network and really just a supportive role, or a program associate role, in facilitating meetings, capacity support, all from a virtual format. And that is actually during my transition time out of school and into the real world as I began looking for a job. And that's actually when I landed my first full-time job as a community research coordinator at a local nonprofit also in Atlanta. And so then I finally left my part-time to pursue a full-time role. So those were all of my experiences outside of coursework that I really learned from and really contribute to a lot of my early career or early professional experience within public health. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them down below. I'll definitely answer them, and see you next time. Bye.